Hey, everybody, it's talking season this preseason. Of course, talking season is when people like me and even coaches and players across the country start talking about the upcoming season. Media Day is just around the corner in the big five conferences. And so here at 247 Sports, we decided let's poll our own writers. Let's get a jump start on these media days and do our own polls and our own surveys and try to have a predicted order of finish in the five major conferences. And today we start with the ACC. I surveyed 21 of our reporters, both national and, of course, our teams on our ACC sites. We have a wealth of knowledge and fantastic insight. And first off, I just wanted to go through their predicted order of finish. I want to give you some of my thoughts on everything, but I've got my notes here on my computer screen. I'm going to go through these one by one here quickly, and we're going to go into a little bit more depth from there. No surprise, our 21 reporters selected Clemson as the winner in the Coastal Division with 21 of the 21 votes. No surprise there. Now, what's going to be interesting is this second spot behind Clemson in the division. NC State and Boston College separated by only 12 points in our survey. NC State, though, takes number 2 with Boston College just behind at number 3. Florida State, number 4. At number 5 is Louisville. Number 6, Wake Forest. Number 7, Syracuse. Of course, Clemson, a no-brainer there. Their defense returns nearly every single starter. That offense, everyone wants to talk about Trevor Lawrence leaving. DJ Uiagalelei is going to be phenomenal this season. He is a legitimate Heisman contender this preseason, in my opinion. And while you won't see him as a first-team quarterback in the ACC this preseason, because everybody's going to go with Sam Howell because of what he's already done and what he's already proved, because the media and the coaches, they're not the types that go give the award or the preseason award to a new player, so to speak, even though he's got 2 starts under his belt at Clemson. But DJ is going to be the best quarterback in the ACC by the end of the season. He's going to be in that Heisman Trophy race. That offense is going to be fantastic, even without Trevor Lawrence, even without Travis Etienne. They're going to be just fine. They get Justin Ross back at receiver. He's going to be the best receiver in the ACC. And my gosh, Clemson's defensive line. Are you kidding me? Brian Breesy returns after a phenomenal rookie campaign as a freshman. That unit is not only going to be the best defensive line potentially in the country, in my opinion. That defense has what it takes to be number 1 at the end of the season. That might be Brent Venables' best defense at Clemson as the coordinator in his long career there. Clemson, legitimate top 4 team nationally, maybe top 3, maybe top 2 in the preseason. But I'm telling you, DJ at the end of this year is someone we're going to be looking at and going, we should have just given the benefit of the doubt because of what you saw last season in that start, especially against Notre Dame on the road and, of course, against Boston College. So I'm going Clemson too at number 1, no doubt. Now, the issue I do have at number 2 behind Clemson in the division is between NC State and Boston College. A lot of people going with NC State here. I understand that. You know, you've got Jonathan Knight back at running back. Some people believe he might be the top running back in the conference. I'm not so sure. I think the running back race for the best running back in the conference in the ACC is wide open this year. I think anybody could potentially take that. Having said that, I'm not sold on Devin Leary as a quarterback, especially down the field, I should say. And I'm not sure NC State is going to be consistent enough offensively, especially in the passing game, and explosive enough to be a team that I see doing enough to finish number 2 in the conference. Now, I do think they finished in the top 3 or 4. Not sure if they finished number 2. And the reason why is Boston College. Boston College, to me, in that division, they've got the second best offensive line behind Clemson. They've got a fantastic receiver in Zay Flowers. He might be just the most versatile route runner in all of college football. This is a guy that if you're like looking for someone, not necessarily the next Devontae Smith or even Jalen Waddle, though Devontae Smith's much different when he was at Alabama. But Flowers, to me, is a guy that you could put anywhere on the field, and he's such a crisp and smart route runner that he's going to be successful. And Boston College has that. I'm not so sure NC State has a guy quite like that. Then also Boston College, their offensive line, they might have 2, maybe 3 all SEC players there in the trenches. They're going to be just fine, including Davidson transfer Zion Johnson. And then Phil Jerkovic, to me, at quarterback for him, be more consistent. He was up and down last season, but you see what the coaches saw in him after transferring in. I think, to me, Boston College with Jeff Hafley in his second year here is going to contend for that number 2 spot. And if that's the case, is is Jeff Hafley potentially a coach somewhere else this time next year? Keep an eye on that. Beyond that, I don't have much of an issue below that. Florida State, Louisville, Wake Forest, and Syracuse. I think Syracuse by far should be the easy pick to finish last in the conference. Louisville is a team, though, that interests me because Louisville took that big step back offensively last year, despite returning some key pieces and, of course, having Malik Cunningham at quarterback. And yet they just kept stubbing their toe, couldn't get things going. I think the offense improves this year, even though they're losing 3 or 4 really top-tier guys, at least for their offense and what they consider outside Malik Cunningham. But they should improve just by the nature of experience there and actually going through a season without having to really deal with COVID. So I could understand them maybe being selected 5th in the conference behind Florida State. I do wonder, though, maybe if we're underselling Louisville a little bit. I think Louisville could very well finish ahead of Florida State. Florida State, not necessarily a trendy pick, but they're inching closer. They're finally starting to get some more respect because they've been doing absolutely a great job in the transfer portal, as we know. But they've missed on a couple of guys, particularly on the offensive line. And I know it sounds like a broken record, but Florida State's offensive line is probably going to be an issue once again this year. It should be an issue. They got to recruit better there. They weren't able to land one of their top guys they're really going after in the transfer portal in the offensive line. And not say that hurts because you don't know what you've got until you have it, and they don't have it. But I think we're looking at Florida State, and some people are just thinking that McKenzie Milton coming off what should have been a career-ending injury, and thank goodness he's back because he's a fantastic quarterback and great player to watch. But to me, with McKenzie Milton, I don't know if he can lift all boats, so to speak, in the harbor. I don't know if he can do that. We'll see with Florida State. I'm hesitant to really kind of sell on them and start saying, or buy on them, I should say. I think I'm selling more. I visited Tallahassee back in May, sat down with all the coaches there in their offices. They are an extremely hardworking group. I know you hear that everywhere, but man, they're really getting after it on the recruiting trail. They're really, really trying to fill those holes that they have. They feel good about that offense. The number one thing I took away from that conversation, outside of the other stuff you've heard about the transfer portal and what they're trying to fill, is talking to Kenny Dillingham, their offensive coordinator, and Mike Norvell, the head coach, and that this offense is going to look a little bit different this season because they're finally going to be able to implement more of what you maybe saw at Memphis under Mike Norvell that you didn't get to really see a lot at Florida State because they started 4 different quarterbacks. They weren't really able to gel. They weren't able to really put that entire offense in because of the COVID pandemic. This year, you'll see more of that. They trust McKenzie Milton. It's a process there. It's going to take a few years, but this offense should seem more cohesive and have a better identity this season. Sure, they might finish 4th, but I think I'm a little bit higher on Louisville at that spot. Let's go to the Atlantic Division. This is the most interesting race in the ACC by far. Clemson's just going to run away, obviously, with the Coastal, at least we think. And as I look at my notes here, North Carolina, Miami, which one wins the division? And our reporters overwhelmingly picked North Carolina over Miami. I was kind of surprised at that. I thought it'd be a little bit closer. But 15 of our writers picked North Carolina. 5 picked Miami. And Pitt, by the way, got 1 vote to win the division. Listen, Sam Howell, he's going to be first-team ACC quarterback in the preseason on every list. Still, I think DJ's the best quarterback at Clemson. DJ Uiagalelei, when we get to the midpoint of the season, you're going to go, he is the best quarterback in the ACC and one of the top guys in the country. Sam Howell, what worries me, much like we're talking about McKenzie Milton with Florida State, you can't compare these two teams, Florida State and North Carolina, which is crazy to think. You'd think 10 years ago, why are we comparing these two teams? But North Carolina, obviously the better team, especially offensively. I'm not so sure Sam Howell can lift everybody up. He loses a lot on that offense. And what really worries me about North Carolina going into this season, that kind of makes me hesitate from maybe picking them number one, as our writers did overwhelmingly. What worries me is that offensive line, Sam Howell getting enough time to throw the football. And I'm not so sure that they've got the big weapons that everybody kind of expects. He needs more out of these guys. I mean, they got to prove themselves, obviously, but I just don't think you can assume, hey, Sam Howell's back, this offense is going to be just fine. And then here's the other thing. I mentioned the offensive line being bad. The defensive line, I think, is not going to be very good this year either. Those two units combined. And listen, the trenches is where you win football games on any level. Doesn't matter. The trenches for North Carolina on offense and defense combined might be the worst in the ACC. That's my opinion. I don't. I'm hesitant to pick them to win the division. I think they're going to finish second. Miami is my pick. Miami picked up 5 first-place votes from our reporters. I think Miami will win the Atlantic. They're absolutely loaded. De'Ara King, and here's the other thing, like Florida State, but even more so, Miami has absolutely been killing it in the transfer portal these last 2 years under Manny Diaz. We all know that. And they had a huge win in the transfer portal when they got Charleston Rambo out of OU. They got a fantastic receiver, a guy that can sneak downfield, kind of that, I wouldn't say a scat running back type, but you know what I mean, kind of a smaller guy that could kind of squeeze between coverages and get behind guys. I've seen him play in person a couple of times, or I should say once. Um, and I'm very impressed with them. I want to say he was underutilized at OU, but he just didn't seem to kind of catch on the way he wanted to. Obviously, that's why he transferred. But I think at Miami, because of the way they spread out the ball in Rhett Lashley's offense, they're going to be very successful with De'Ara King back at quarterback. Of course, he's coming off that ACL injury. I think he's fine. He's certainly making waves this preseason in the NIL and signing all those deals and everything. But I think Miami is the team to beat in that conference, or excuse me, in that division. And I think Miami will be the team that meets Clemson in the ACC championship game. Now, the team to watch in the division is Pitt, because as I mentioned, one writer picked them to win the division and meet Clemson in the ACC championship game. Pitt defense is going to be fantastic. Surprise, surprise. Pat Narduzzi. Yeah, Pat Narduzzi is going to have a great defense. I know. Cam Bright at linebacker, fantastic player. They're going to be a defense that absolutely terrorizes offenses. And at some point, one of these top teams they're playing, they're going to knock off. They're going to frustrate them, and they're going to make some waves this season. You just watch. I don't think they win the division. I don't think they get to the ACC title game. Still some questions, obviously, offensively, but that defense is going to win them some games this year, and they're going to pull an upset. Virginia Tech at number 4. I see that. Virginia Tech and Virginia probably in the same wheelhouse. So going into this season, North Carolina and Virginia Tech's defensive backfields, I love those. Those two things really stood out to me when I was looking at this division outside, because we want to talk about quarterbacks and offense, but the things that really stood out to me in this division are the secondaries at North Carolina and Virginia Tech. And that's going to make Virginia Tech very, very competitive this year. They're going to get back on the winning track. I think that Braxton Burmeister, quarterback, he's very good in the middle of the field, which is huge in college football, as we know. And I think that's an underrated quality about him. Keep an eye on what he's able to do in the middle of the field. If he can get some guys out in space and they're a step or two ahead of someone on a slant, this is an offense that could really take off this year. We'll see. Virginia, Brennan Armstrong's fine at quarterback. They're going to be fine there. The rest of the team, though, I've got questions everywhere else. And so I would put Virginia Tech ahead of Virginia at this point. Looking back at my notes, Georgia Tech at 6, I see that. They've got a fantastic running back group with Jamar Griggs and Jordan Mason. We know that. Probably the best duo in the conference when you talk about depth. But what are they going to do at quarterback? They were so young, obviously, last year, starting a true freshman. But do they see notable improvement there? I have my questions still. I think Jeff Collins is going to get it done there and get that team to winning football and back to bowl games. But this slow build, you should start seeing results this season. I'm not so sure we see it, but that's the great thing about college football, especially, I mean, listen, after this pandemic, you have an opportunity here to say, hey, last year was a fluke, or we built off of last season. So coaches kind of have a built-in excuse. And really, I understand either side, because last year was so crazy. You could have won one or both ways and not really been blamed for it, because no one knew what to expect last year. And Duke, man, listen, overwhelmingly the last pick in our predictions. I agree. I think we're witnessing the end of the David Cutcliffe era at Duke. I think that we're seeing, I don't know if it's a slow burn to death, but I think David Cutcliffe is very much on the hot seat this year. And this may very well be his last year there, whether it's him getting fired or him just retiring, resigning or something like that. I think they've taken too much of a step back offensively. They were atrocious at times last year to even watch. It wasn't very entertaining. And I don't think they really addressed their major concerns this offseason. So I have a big issue with them. And sorry to say it, and I love David Cutcliffe. Loved watching his teams at Ole Miss, especially. I just don't know if they're going to get it. All right. So we also voted on some superlatives in the ACC. Of course, the ACC champion, overwhelmingly, every voter, of course, picked Clemson, all 21. ACC Player of the Year we selected, who we think will be ACC Player of the Year, who we think will be the ACC Coach of the Year, and what game stands out on the schedule the most. Now, 2 of those 3 categories, pretty easy to predict. ACC Player of the Year, everybody going with Sam Howell. Everybody keeps going with North Carolina in the division. Sam Howell got 14 votes for ACC Player of the Year. Second place was DJ Uiagalelei with 5 votes. DJ would have been my selection. Brian Breesy, the fantastic sophomore, or I guess freshman, if you're considering the COVID issues where you're able to maintain a year of eligibility. In the second year, Brian Breesy got a vote, and Phil Jerkovic actually got a vote too. ACC Coach of the Year, a close vote. Jeff Hafley at Boston College, who I think, as I said, keep an eye on him. He could be the next big thing in college football. He could be a guy that's in the mix if we get some blue blood jobs that come open, or some top tier Power 5 jobs come open, or maybe the NFL. Jeff Hafley, 7 votes, but right behind him, Mack Brown, North Carolina coach Mack Brown, in his 70s this year, one of incredibly 4 coaches this year who will be in their 70s and in the group of 5 or Power 5 level. Or I should say no, because Ohio's Frank Solich is one of them. So 3 on the Power 5 level, or 2 on the Power 5 level. Mack Brown and Nick Saban, and of course Butch Davis at FIU. So 2 and 2, group of 5, and 1 in Power 2 in Power 5. Sorry, but Mack Brown 6 votes, and behind him Manny Diaz at 3. Again, think we're underselling Miami here a little bit. I think Manny Diaz might end up being the coach of the year in that conference. I mean, if they win the division, I think there's no doubt about it. And I think Miami does win the division there. And the ACC Game of the Year, this is an easy pick. Miami at North Carolina on October 16th. What else? 13 of 21 of our voters voted for that game. Some voted for some non-conference games, particularly the Clemson-Georgia game, obviously. But when it comes to the ACC battles and the biggest games, it's obviously Miami and North Carolina. Absolutely. So there you go. There are selections in the ACC preseason predictions from our sports team at 247Sports. 21 writers, national writers, and our ACC team beat people. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you next time.